guys, I'm Leah, and I love my Instant Pot. I have two, both a 6-quart and an 8-quart. I'm no expert, just someone who uses and loves hers. Today I have my 6-quart Duo Plus here with me, as I figured that's the size that more people have at home. Also, most recipes are written with a 6-quart machine in mind. If you have a larger one or a smaller one, you might need to tweak the amount of liquid you're using accordingly, with more liquid or less. Although I'm going to walk through some of that a bit later. I'm also going to talk about the important things that you might want to know about an Instant Pot, as well as demonstrate actually using it. So you can look forward to that today. Okay, first, here's a close-up of some of the controls and buttons on my Instant Pot. As you can see, there are a number of different buttons and options. Most of the buttons simply are different pre-programmed cooking times and temperatures for that specific kind of food. Personally, I use high pressure and just vary the cooking times for the majority of the cooking I do in my Instant Pot. But if I'm making a roast and I need to pressure cook it for like an hour, then I can hit the meat stew, which is right here, and have that time jump to a higher number instead of having to hit pressure cook and then this plus button for 60 times to get 60 minutes. I appreciate having the machine do a few of those settings for me. Some of the extra buttons on the bottom refer to other features of the Instant Pot. You can use it as a slow cooker, which you can see right here. You can use it to make rice. You can use it to make yogurt. You can use it to sterilize, steam cook. Many of these things are just pre-programmed times, like I mentioned. I personally haven't tried using all of the features here, but I certainly know people in Instant Pot forums who have and absolutely adore every feature that is included. You can also do a delayed start using your machine here, which can be really helpful if you don't need to get it started right away. And you also want to make a note of this keep warm function. That keeps the heat on the bottom of the pot, so it won't cool down quite as quickly when you're done because it wants to, it keeps the heat source on so it retains more heat. There are also the pressure level and pressure cook buttons. Those are what you're going to use to manually program your pot. And guys, my favorite button of all on this whole display, Saute. Say I'm making a soup in the pot. I really like the depth of flavor that you can get from sauteing items before they go into soup. Things like onions, celery, or garlic. So I'll add a little bit of oil into my Instant Pot liner, this silver guy right here. And once the pan is hot, I'll throw in the onions, celery, and let them sweat a little bit, then add the garlic. I'll then use the cancel button to turn off the saute function, and then I can add in all the other things I want in my soup, and put the lid on, and hit pressure cook for like 10 minutes, and then voila, soup that tastes like it's been simmered all day. Note, you don't want to fill the pot too full. There is a very specific mark right on the inside. That is as full as you ought to fill it because there needs to be space for the pressure to build in the pot. Oh, and if you're cooking something that expands like rice or beans, you're going to need to leave even a little bit more space to allow for that expansion. I'd like to also point out that when you're reading a recipe for the Instant Pot, you'll see a total cook time, but it's not typically listed how long it takes for the pot to come to pressure. This time can vary, but there is something you can do to help it along. If many of the ingredients that you're adding are already hot, it's easier for the pot to come to pressure. For instance, if you put in frozen chicken breasts, you might only need to cook them for like 20 minutes, but they might take 20 minutes to come to pressure. Still, knowing that I can pull frozen chicken breasts out and throw them in my Instant Pot with just some water or maybe some salsa or dressing or just broth and have some shredded chicken in like 40 or 45 minutes, sure beats kicking myself for forgetting to take chicken out of the freezer earlier in the day. And I've saved some pretty freezer burned chicken doing it that way too, because you don't lose a lot of moisture with pressure cooking, so the freezer burned parts don't turn out too bad. My pro tip, you can just use your hand mixer to shred the chicken right in the pot. Okay, so a big piece of information that you need to know: the difference between a quick release and a natural pressure release. You'll see these abbreviated typically as NPR or QR. A quick release, or QR, means that you are manually releasing the built-up pressure in your pot. You do this by turning the release valve at the top. And on our pot, here is the top. You can see there are, well, maybe you can't see. This is sealing, this is venting. It's rented right on the pot. So if you were pressure cooking, you were gonna turn this to sealing. When you are releasing that, you're gonna move it to venting, and all of the steam will shoot on out the top. Many people are a little intimidated by this process at first because the pressure does come out pretty forcefully and it does spray some fine drips of water. Do not cover the valve steam while this is happening. I'd also recommend not placing the pot under wooden cabinets, as the steam can damage the bottom of them. I've seen a few products or tips that help with the release, like a diverter for the steam that directs it off to the side instead of straight up, or finagling a wooden spoon to hit that release valve to get the steam to release. Personally though, I just place my pot away from cabinets and simply use my hand to move that release valve. Yeah, it's a little loud and I was a little timid with it at first, but with use comes familiarity. The pressure release usually takes like 2 or 3 minutes. You'll know it's done when the little silver pin drops down. I will show you exactly what that is too. This little pin, when you are pressure cooking, it comes right up to the top and is flush. When there's no pressure, it's depressed. So you can see right now, obviously there's no pressure and it is depressed down there. When there is pressure, it will come up higher and be flush. And do keep in mind that is for my pot right here. Every model of the Instant Pot that they have or a different pressure cooker might be slightly different. The pressure might be indicated in slightly different ways, but just pay attention to how the pressure is indicated on your specific Instant Pot. So the alternative to a quick release is a natural pressure release, or an NPR. My personal tip: this is always the one you want to use with meats if you can, because it helps the meat to stay really tender and juicy. The equivalent of letting it rest. But basically, an NPR means that after something has finished cooking, you're just gonna let it sit in the pot and let the pressure release naturally. It depends on how long it takes for the release of pressure, but I typically allow at least 10 minutes. I'll set a timer and come back after that amount of time to see if the pin has dropped. I've also seen a hack where one person wraps a cold, damp towel around any of the metal parts of the pot, so the sides, or there's metal on the top, just on the metal parts, and he claimed that it helped speed the natural pressure release up. I haven't tried that yet. Only after the pin has dropped should you turn the top to release the lid. Never, ever, ever try to take your lid off while it's under pressure. Never. Okay? Never. If you try to take the lid off while everything is still under pressure, the contents can explode all over the place. And things are really hot in there. You don't want burns. Make sure the pin has dropped on your cooker or the cooker shows it's not under pressure anymore before you take the lid off. I'd like to move on to when you might get a burn notice. You typically get this error message for one of two reasons. You don't have a thin enough liquid in the pot, or not enough liquid in the pot for it to come to pressure. Not having enough liquid in the pot for it to come to pressure causes the bottom to scorch a little bit. All you can do is try to save your ingredients, scrape the bottom of the liner to get the residue off, and try again. I've only ever had one burn notice, and it was because I didn't put enough water in with my rice in my 8-quart pot. I learned that if I'm using my larger pot, I need to increase my liquid just a little bit, maybe by an extra quarter or half of a cup. More space in the pot means it needs more pressure means more liquid. The reverse is true as well. If you have a smaller Instant Pot, like a 3-quart, you might not need an entire cup of water. For a 6-quart Instant Pot, you need at least 1 cup of thin liquid. If you're cooking something that absorbs a lot of water, keep that in mind too. You need to increase your water. The other way that you might get a burn notice is if you use the saute feature on the pot and did not deglaze it. It's very important to deglaze your pot with some of the cooking liquid before you pressure cook. Residue that's left on the bottom of the pot here can cause a burn notice. If I use the saute function and I see any residue in the pot before I put the rest of the ingredients in, I take the time to deglaze it with some wine or stock, depending on what I'm preparing. For instance, if I make a roast in my Instant Pot, I'll typically cut it into a few large chunks that fit into the pot. This both cuts down on the total cooking time and gives me more surface area to sear before pressure cooking. Searing the meat using the saute function is where you get all that delicious depth of flavor. After I've seared the sides very well, I'll use tongs to remove them and set them aside. Then I'll pour a bit of red wine or beef stock in the pan and use a wooden spoon to scrape all that wonderful fond up from the bottom of the pot. Add the meat back in and pressure cook for like 45 minutes. Since the meat is already hot, it won't take too long to come to pressure and cook. And since it's meat, I'll do a natural pressure release. If I'm feeling like having some potatoes and carrots alongside this, I'll add them after the natural pressure release has happened. I can simply drop them right in on that meat or put them in another little oven-safe pot and pressure cook for another 7 to 8 minutes. Do another natural release and you have dinner, a nice juicy pot roast and some side veggies. Okay, for this next part, you're gonna see a time-lapse video of me putting together some mac and cheese in the Instant Pot. The recipe I'm following is from a website called Pinch of Yum, and I can certainly include the link to that someplace for you guys. It cooks very quickly and doesn't need many ingredients and is really yummy. This recipe demonstrates a few techniques that are important. Step 1. Add uncooked noodles, water, and salt to the pot. This will cook for about 3 minutes, but takes about 10 to come to pressure. When I timed it at home, it took 12 minutes and 36 seconds. One thing I'm doing to shorten my time coming to pressure is to use water that is already quite hot. At home, I used hot tap water, and in this demonstration, I used very hot water. That ought to shorten the time coming to pressure even more. I'm going to check that my valve is set to sealed and select pressure cook and verify it's on high pressure and set the cooking time of 3 minutes. Step 2, we'll do a quick pressure release. Using a quick release will help us not to overcook the pasta. This is a pretty loud thing. A quick pressure release typically lasts about 2 minutes. Step 3, we'll add in the butter and stir to melt it. Then we simply add the shredded cheese and milk and stir. I usually add a tiny bit of hot sauce because it helps to bring out the cheese flavor. A tiny bit won't make it spicy. Today I've used some garlic powder, some onion powder, and some chili powder to help that depth of flavor. Once it's creamy and dreamy, you can spoon that right into bowls and enjoy, which my camera woman, Rachel, and I are going to do ASAP after filming. Lastly, I'd like to share some important tips. The first is mentioned above. You can always add dairy last. It's quite thick and can potentially cause a burn notice. If you want to thicken something, I typically use the method of a cornstarch slurry that I add in after I've completed pressure cooking. I simply use the saute function for a bit to keep things hot while the cornstarch cooks. If you take the lid off and find something not fully cooked, simply pop that lid back on and program another few minutes of pressure cooking. Just make sure you set the valve to sealed again. And make sure your pot isn't at pressure anymore when you're checking it. Safety, folks. Be careful if you set your Instant Pot on a stove. If a burner accidentally turns on, you can melt the bottom of your pot. Also make sure that you have your silver liner in the Instant Pot, this guy right here. Some people keep their power cord in the pot, so they have to visually check that the liner is inside before putting ingredients in. And I have heard stories of people accidentally pouring liquid into the bottom of the pot with no liner in. Make sure you have a sealing ring in the lid of your Instant Pot. Mine is right here, goes right along the outside. If you have no ring, you have no pressure. Also make sure that you've moved the vent to the correct setting, sealed versus venting. I once made that no ring mistake, tried to cook a whole roast, and was so unhappy by the time I realized my error. Needless to say, I did not have roast for dinner that night. It took very long to cook. You can also substitute stock or broth for water for better flavor. I typically add a little scoop of better than bouillon into whatever I'm making. I like their veggie flavor the best, and I can use it with almost any flavor profile I might be making. I also cut and prep all the ingredients I need before I start cooking so I can dump them in right when I need them. Adding ingredients can go really fast when you're sauteing, and it's nice to have them all lined up. You hear a few beeps when you're operating the Instant Pot. It beeps when it comes to pressure and starts your program cook time, and it beeps multiple times when your cook time is completed. If you're doing a quick release, you'll want to release the pressure in the pot right then. If you're doing a natural release, you'll see the numbers on your pot start to increase. That's timing how long the pot has been off and naturally releasing pressure. The last things that I want to cover are some cleaning tips. The pot liner that comes included is stainless steel. You can buy non-stick liners as well if you prefer that. Personally, I've always been able to soak and scrub my liner clean, and for really tough bits, I've used Barkeeper's Friend, which is a scouring powder that works wonders with a little elbow grease. You can also get a glass lid, but keep in mind that standard lid sizes work with it. So I use a lid from a regular pot I have for my 8-quart, and I did have a glass lid come with my 6-quart. You'd use the glass lid for slow cooking when you want to be able to see inside the pot, and I've also heard that folks use it to make popcorn with the saute function in there, which I really want to try. A point here, a glass lid and the lid for the Instant Pot are not interchangeable. The lid that comes with the pot, this one, twists onto the machine, and a glass lid just sits on top of the liner. To be honest, I'm not sure if it would even come to pressure even a little bit if you used a glass lid, but I certainly recommend using the pressure cooking lid if you're trying to pressure cook. If your sealing ring gets a little smelly, many people swear that storing the lid upside down helps with that. I do that, and I don't notice too many lingering smells. But I also have some extra sealing rings that I've purchased because if I'm making a cheesecake in there, I don't want any hint of the roast that I made in there the week before. So I use one for savory and one for sweet or delicate flavors. I've also put the whole lid in the top rack of my dishwasher. I just make sure that I let it fully dry by the time I want to use my Instant Pot again. So some of the accessories that I'd like to mention, this is the first one. This is the glass lid that actually came with my 6-quart Instant Pot. Like I said previously in the presentation, I do use a standard size pot lid for my 8-quart. So any lid, these are standard sizes, so any lid that fits your standard size pots will be able to fit your Instant Pot. This comes with your Instant Pot as well. It sits on the bottom of your pot, and you can put things on top of it and use this to lift them out. You would do this with something like my next accessory. This is an expanding strainer. I can put this right on top of this. I'll put my eggs lining up right in there, and then I can pressure cook those for 4 to 5 minutes. I like a medium boiled egg, and I can just put them in there, pressure cook them for that amount of time, and have a beautiful medium cooked egg. Take them out like this, out of the pot. I also would use the sling with something like this. This is a push bottom cake tin. This is small enough that it's from Fat Daddy's. I got it off Amazon, and it is small enough that it can fit inside of my Instant Pot. So what I will do in a pot like this, I've made meatloaf in it, and what I mostly use it for is cheesecake. I'll line the sides, I'll line the bottom with some parchment paper, press the crust into it, freeze it a little bit, and then pour that beautiful cheesecake filling inside, and then pressure cook it for, it's been a while since I've made one. I don't remember exactly how long that takes, but not too long. And because you don't lose a lot of moisture, you have a natural water bath occurring in there, so you get a very smooth cheesecake. I hope that you're feeling more comfortable with using your Instant Pot, and this gave you some good tips, and that you can't wait to get started cooking.